What's up? How are you? Everybody good? Awesome. Hey, thanks for having me tonight. I'm truly honored to be here. I love Bryant May and I love Heather May. I love the Exchange Church, and I've enjoyed watching this movement of God right here in Pearl for the last, I think Bryant told me it's 12 years now that it's happening right here. So, hey, thank you for giving up a Sunday night to come talk about marriage. I know that's not always an easy thing to do. I don't know if there are any games on tonight, guys, that we're competing for tonight, but thank you for being here. My wife and I, like Brian said, we've been married 25 years. And I want you to know you're looking at a guy tonight who, even though I'm a marriage counselor, I'm a believer, I'm a former pastor at a church, my wife and I do not have a perfect marriage. I want to say that out the gate because I don't think a perfect marriage exists. I don't. And to be completely honest with you, in 2010, my wife and I went on an adoption journey. We adopted a young boy from Ethiopia and did not know at the time, but when he came home, he had special needs issues. And it really just ripped us in two in so many different ways. We were spiraling, not knowing what to do for this kid. And as a result, sometimes our marriages begin to get impacted by life that's going on around us. You feel that? I feel that. And we felt that. And if I'm being really, really honest with you, in 2010, I think we looked at each other and we were like, hey, are we going to make it? And so we really started to do some counseling at that time for us. And here we are 14 years later. I can tell you, I think our marriage is greater than it's ever been, but it's still without issues. I mean, it has issues, right? And my wife and I we go see a counselor about once a month. We still just try to be proactive with that because we do believe what Bryant said, in the presence of many counselors, there's wisdom. But listen, tonight, here's the thing. We're going to have some fun. Is that okay? Y'all up for that? These are going to be some really short sessions too, okay? So just take a deep breath. My promise to you is we'll get you out of here on time tonight. But like Bryant said, I hope and pray that just as we talk through some of our goals tonight, that we can take away at least one thing. Just one thing that I hope you can take with you and apply to your marriage. I want it to be very practical. I've been praying for you. I've been praying for this night. I've been praying that it would just be something that would bless you. But I've had the privilege now of counseling in this community for about 20 years. And I think there are two kind of things that I see that are repeated over and over in marriages that keep couples in a pit, keep couples stuck, and ultimately can be things that begin to rip a couple apart. Here are the two things. We're going to talk about them both tonight. One is unmet expectations. Unmet expectations. And the other is unresolved conflict in your marriage. So we're going to look at both of those tonight. Is that cool? Hey, I want you to see real quick, we're going to talk about unmet expectations for just a minute, okay? And I want you to see right out of God's Word where there are people who have had unmet expectations in their life. In fact, if you look at John chapter 4, you'll see that there was a woman that Jesus met one day by the well. Do you remember this story? And Jesus walked up to her and he said, hey, go get your husband. And what did she say? She says, hey, I don't have one. She'd already been through 5 husbands as she was about to start on her 6th husband. And we're meeting a woman who's just put so much expectation in a man, and a man making her feel loved and seen and valued. And then you flip over just one chapter beyond that, in John chapter 5, you meet a guy. This dude has been sitting by the pool of Bethesda for 38 years. 38 years. A man sat by a pool because his expectation was there are healing properties in this pool, and if somebody would just lift me up and put me in there, I will be healed. And so he had an unmet expectation because he sat there for 38 years and it never happened until Jesus walked up that day. And I love the story in Mark chapter 5 too, with a woman who had the bleeding problem for 12 years. She put so much hope and she put so much expectation in the physicians of the day, and the girl saw so many doctors and none of them could help her. None of them could stop the bleeding until Jesus showed up that day. But I want you to see, too, that even Jesus himself, he understands what it feels like to live in relationship with somebody where unmet expectations exist. Do you remember the night of the garden? Right before his betrayal, he was hanging out with his boys, and he said, hey, listen, my time is near. I'm going to go pray. Would you stay with me? Would you what? What did he ask him to do? Stay awake. Pray for me. And he comes back, and what are they doing? They're sleeping. Unmet expectation, right? And so tonight, if you're here and you have some expectations in your life and you're about to see you do, okay, there's hope. And we're going to talk about what to do with these, okay? So here's what I want you to know about expectations. Do you realize you have expectations about just about everything in life? I'm a Mississippi State fan. Don't hold it against me. I know I'm in Alabama country with Bryant, all right? And every year I had this expectation as a Bulldog that today, I see some maroon and white out here, today, this year is going to be our year that we're going to have a good team. And what happens? Every year I'm like, oh, disappointment again. It just seems to be an unmet expectation. We have expectations about everything in life. And I want you to see, this is probably the most counselor thing that I will say to you all night, okay? A lot of times what drives our expectations are what I call these unconscious roles that we play and these unspoken rules. What does that mean? Do you know that growing up in the home you grew up in, your mom and dad or whoever raised you, they probably did life a particular way. And you watched them raise you, you watched how they interacted in your home. Maybe you said things like, hey, when I get to be older, I'm going to do it very differently than they did, right? But there are roles that you saw played out in your home growing up. When I was 8 years old, my dad had a heart attack at the age of 32. Is that not wild? 10 years later, when I was 18, he had his second heart attack. He survived both of them. And yet at age 8, I saw chaos erupt in my home. And I saw my mom and dad's marriage just really get strained and stressed because of physical health issues in his life. And I don't know why I did this, okay? But at the age of 8, I started playing what I call the rescuer role. I wanted my mom and dad to be okay. I wanted life in my home to be okay. And I began to kind of inject myself into different places just to make life okay. And if there was ever an issue in my personal life, guess what I would try to do? Just shove it down. It's enough chaos in the home. You just be the rescuer. You be the fix-it person. And that was something that I did for years until I got married. And my wife looked at me one day and she said, I love you, but I don't need you to fix me. She would talk to me about things at times. That video, I can really relate to it because I'm like, yeah. Here's what you need to do. Guys, you ever go through that? We're fix-it people, right? Thank you for your hands. Yeah, safe place. Yeah, we do. We try to fix stuff sometimes. Our woman is speaking, and I'm already formulating, okay, here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to do. Are you done talking yet? Okay, here's what you need to do. And boom, here's the blueprint on how you can go tomorrow and make this thing go away for you. Am I alone in that? And I'm telling you, my wife looked at me one day, she says, I love you, but you're not my counselor, and I don't need you to fix me. Like, okay. So I had some unconscious roles that I was playing in my marriage. What about unspoken rules? Okay. I had a pastor in my office last week, and this pastor told me, he said, I feel like a fraud. And I said, well, tell me what makes you feel like a fraud? He says, look, I love my wife. We have what I would call a good marriage. He says, but we've got a lot of issues. And yet I stand on a platform every Sunday and I feel like I'm supposed to have it all together for my church. And my marriage is supposed to be this picture of ideal marriage for my congregation. And as we begin to unpack that, guess what he told me? His dad was a pastor. And his dad never talked about marriage issues between he and his mom. His dad never talked about marriage issues in front of their church. So the guy that was sitting with me thought, well, surely all pastors have got this thing figured out by now, right? And here he was struggling in his marriage and needing to work through some stuff. So sometimes we have these unspoken rules that we hold on to that I know God wants to invite us to open up and really experience truth in that. You see this little point right here at the bottom? Awareness is curative. I say this all the time. Awareness is curative. What does that mean? It means the moment I become aware of something that I'm doing, or I become more aware of why I'm doing it, I can begin to let God, or I can begin the healing process in my life. So awareness can be curative. So let's dive in just a little bit here, and I'm going to show you a chart real quick, okay? And this is one of those things I hope you take home today, okay? And I want to explain this chart. I'm going to walk back here for just a second. Is it okay? Hey, we've already identified we all have expectations, right? Do you have expectations in your marriage, ladies? Yes. Thank you. Guys, do we have expectations in our marriage? Yes, thank you very much. Notice over here on the far right side, though, is their response. Do our expectations ever match up with, I'm moving around, I'll be still. Do our expectations ever match up with their response 100%? Very seldom does it, right? Very seldom does it. And when there's an unmet expectation there, do you see that line in the middle? What does it say? Tension is created. You feel the tension inside. Hey, Brian, if I need to swap to the handheld, I'm good. You feel that tension inside. And Pastor Andy Stanley, he says, always pay attention to the tension. Okay? Always pay attention to the tension you feel in your marriage. Why? Because that is God's clue to you that something is happening right now that is needing to be addressed. It is needing to be talked about. All right? Now, when your spouse does not meet your expectation, it happens often in our home, if I can be real with you. When our spouse doesn't meet our expectation, can I submit to you, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to do one of two things. You're either going to assume the best in your spouse, or you're going to assume the worst in your spouse. You feel that? What does it look like to assume the best? You have to begin to challenge what you think about your spouse. When you feel that tension of an unmet expectation, you have to begin to say, listen, they have probably had a really hard day today. Maybe they're not feeling well. Maybe there's something going on right now with them. I don't know, but I'm giving them grace in this right now, and I'm just going to assume the best. What does assuming the worst look like? Can I be honest? This is the easier thing. They don't care. We've talked about this before. I don't know why they can't get it. That type of stuff, right? That's assuming the worst. And I want to encourage you tonight. You have expectations in your marriage, and your spouse is never going to meet them 100%. And I want to challenge you with God's grace inside of you to say, I want to assume the best in my spouse for as long as I can. Lee, are you saying, should we just expect or assume the best in them forever, like indefinitely? No. So what do? You assume the best for as long as you can. And then at some point, you have to come back to your expectation. And you have to look at it square in the eye and go, is this realistic of me? Because the only thing I can change now with God as my help are my expectations. That feels like losing. Does that feel like losing? Yeah. It feels like losing. Can I give you an example of my marriage where this has played out? My dad raised me on Lombardi time. You guys know what Lombardi time is? You show up everywhere 15 minutes early. Okay? Yeah. The women should laugh because you probably know where I'm about to go with this. I was raised to always be places on time or before time, right? Brian asked me to be here at 4:45 today. I showed up at 4:25. All right? Just telling you, that's how I roll. My wife, not the same way. My wife is notoriously 15 minutes late for everything. And I'm going to tell you where this really began to be interruptive. Here, we'll swap it out. Where this really began to be interruptive in our marriage was church on Sunday mornings. Thank you, buddy. Got it. This would show up on at church on Sunday mornings. So here's the scene. I'm in my garage. I've got the kids already in the car, and who are we missing? Mom. She's still up in the house, getting her hair did, doing whatever she's doing. And meanwhile, I'm sitting in the house or in the car, and my blood pressure is just kind of slowly ticking up, right? Your laughter tells me I'm not alone. So it started ticking up a little bit, and I learned to never honk. I did that once. That was not a good thing. It doesn't work, right? Yeah, you're looking at a guy who's learned a lot. But I would sit there, and so she would finally make it to the car, and of course, I'm giving all the nonverbals. I'm looking at my watch, and I'm huffing, and I'm puffing, and we walk into church, and it's just not a good experience. I was just thinking, we're going to interrupt everybody's worship. They're already singing. They're already doing the deal. And guys, I'm telling you, for a long time, this was a Sunday morning frustration for me. And I kept trying to assume the best as long as I could. And finally, I felt like the Lord said to me one day, he goes, you could just change your expectation. Like, yeah, it's hard. I don't know if I can do that. It goes against everything that's been trained in me. God said, yeah, I know, but I will help you with that. And I remember one Sunday after a blow up, we came back home, and I circled up with her, and I said, hey, look, I love you, and I don't love our experiences on Sunday morning. So I don't love our experiences on Sunday morning. We're frustrated when we get to church, all those types of things. And I said, hey, I want you to know from this day forward, I'm going to try to live with the expectation that we're not on time. And she was like, okay. She was appreciative. She's like, she didn't think I could do it. And I struggled. I'm just being real with you. But I'm telling you, that was the place where God took me. He said, Lee, sometimes, you don't need to keep assuming the best. You need to let me reshape your heart around your expectation. Watch this, for the good of the relationship. And I had to get to a point to say, am I going to hold the expectation higher than I hold the value of my relationship with Jenny? And that was an easy answer for me. The answer was, I don't want to do that. I want to hold my relationship with her higher than I do this expectation getting met. And so we kept being late for church. And I would love to tell you my blood pressure didn't come up from time to time. It still did. But I kept my mouth quiet, and I said, I release it. I release it. God, help me release it. About 6 to 12 months passed of that whole kind of deal, and do you know the craziest thing happened? We get to church on time now. There's something to that. I want to just pause for a second and ask you a question. What are you holding on to right now as an expectation with your spouse? That the longer you hold on to it, the tension grows deeper, your distance grows further apart. And could it be tonight that God is saying, hey, let's talk about that and how we can take some steps in that. Does this make sense? Do you live there? This is my zip code every day, right there. That's where I live. Hey, there's some expectations I hear in my office. I just want to share just a few, okay? Because I know in a room this size, there are all types of unmet expectations. Here's some of the top ones that I hear in my office. I hear unmet expectations around finances. Sometimes people come in my office and they'll say, hey, I just feel alone in my finances. My spouse is just MIA. They're not around. They don't goal set with me. We don't talk about budgeting. And it's just it creates a major frustration in their marriage. Parenting. Whew. Is that ever hard? Your spouse and you always agree 100% on how to parent these little kids that God's entrusted to us. I think two of the greatest sanctifying tools in the Christian journey is marriage and parenting. Why is that? Because in both of those institutions, God will reveal what's deep inside of you that you do not know maybe that's inside of you. I tell couples all the time when they come to see me for couples counseling, I'll say, hey, you know what? Your spouse isn't perfect, and they probably have some work to do. But most oftentimes, the problem is not sitting beside you. The problem is inside of you. And that's exactly what Brian just read. And so parenting can be a place. Intimacy. This is a big one. And when I say intimacy, I know sometimes, fellas, our mind goes straight to physical intimacy, but I want to broaden our scope of the word intimacy. Intimacy is just where we can be fully known with each other and still fully loved. We can have emotional intimacy. We can have spiritual intimacy. We can have relational intimacy. And yes, physical intimacy is birthed out of that, right? Just as a general rule, by the way, fellas and ladies, men want to have sex to make things right in a relationship. Women will only have sex when things are right in a relationship. Does that make sense? Yeah, getting a lot of head nods there. We all live with this, though. And this is one of the big ones. I'm just being honest with you because I know as I'm talking about this right now, there's some people here tonight, and this is a tender spot where the enemy has convinced you that you're a failure, that you're not enough, and all those things, and it's just not true. Family and in-laws, boy, that's another one. That's a big one too. poor boundaries there, and family and in-laws kind of having their way, and just time together, just spending time together. You know, how often do you and your spouse just spend one-on-one time together? I would encourage you, if you want to take a note, I would encourage you every month to have 2 dates together. And you've got to call them a date, and I'll tell you why in a second, okay? So don't just go like, well, we kind of are together all the time. That's not the same, okay? I want you, this would be cool, guys, ask your lady, ask her out on a date. And ladies, on the other time of the month, ask him on a date. And here's the deal. When you go on a date, can I give you the 2 rules of a date night or date afternoon? You can't talk about your kids, and you can't talk about any problems. And this is where people go, well, what in the world do you talk about then? I promise you, you will find things to talk about when you begin to just slow down and connect. Here's some ways we can overcome unmet expectations. Understand this, marriage takes work in every season. Bryant said it. Some of you have been married decades. Some of you have been married maybe days or weeks. I don't care what season you're in, your marriage is going to require work. Here's a question I would ask you to ask yourself. And here's the best way to ask any of these questions tonight, okay? Don't ask them from a shameful place of like, oh my gosh, am I doing that or am I not? No, that won't help you. Let curiosity be your friend. Here's a question I would ask you, though. Am I actively working on connecting with my spouse? Am I actively working on connecting with my spouse? And if I'm not, no shame. Just, hey, I wonder what that's about. I wonder what that's about. But your marriage is going to take work. Next is this. Ask, is my expectation really realistic? Am I assuming the best here? Do I need to change my expectation? Sometimes unmet expectations happen because it's just unrealistic. Well, my buddy John and Sarah, I mean, they do this same thing. You know, why can't we? I'm just telling you, John and Sarah are different from you guys. And you got to look at your marriage and say, is what I'm expecting right now, is that possible in this season of our life right now? And it may not be. We may need to change that, okay? How about this? Speak into your spouse who they are and not what they aren't doing. Boy, that's hard. Speak into their life who they are. Tell them some things that you love about them, things that you married them for, and keep reminding them of that all the time. There are 2 types of conversations we can have. We can have what I call connection-building conversations, or we can have transactional conversations. What is that? Well, let me tell you, transactional is easy. I walk through the door of my home every night, and you will hear a lot of transactional type conversations. I'll look at my kids, and I'll be like, hey, what's the homework situation? Have you cleaned your room? Do you need help with dinner tonight? You need to do that. That's transactional stuff, right? It's about what they're doing or what they're going to do. That's the easiest types of conversations. Connecting building conversations are very different. They're walking up to your spouse, and I would challenge you to do this. At the first time you see your spouse at the end of a long day, is walk up and just give one big non-sexual hug every day. Ladies, that one's for you. Non-sexual hug. No pats, no slaps, no deals like that. Just give her a hug and ask this conversational type of, or this connecting kind of conversation. Hey, I'd love to hear about your day in a minute. Let me go put some things down. I'll come right back. Can I give you a 3-word sentence that is like amazing with these? It's hard, but it's, tell me more. Tell me more. Dudes are like, are you kidding me? I already hear enough. I don't know if I want to hear more. But if you know this, you don't have to fix anything. That's a game changer. You just to listen, okay? All right. Clearly communicate expectations. Most expectations go unmet because they go unspoken. This is really big. Do you know why we don't speak about our expectations? Every one of you in the room said, yes, we have them. But do you know why we don't talk about them? Most of the time, it's because of fear of rejection. if I share this with my spouse right now, they may not agree with me, they may not follow through with this, and I'm going to feel very rejected, and I can't be rejected. So what we do instead is we do a trade-off. I'm going to pretend that you wouldn't reject me because I'm not going to talk to you about it. But the longer I don't talk to you about it, I'm creating more and more separation from you. And the very person that I'm trying to avoid this conversation with begins to be the person that I resent the most. Talk about your expectations. And spouse, listen to me. When they begin to share that, just go, hey, thank you. I know that took a lot of courage for you to share. Thank you for sharing that with me. Speak up on your expectations. Seek to compromise where you can and establish roles with each other where you can, you know. Jenny and I are always trading off, I feel like almost week to week on, hey, who's got the kids' activities this week? What's going on? But Sunday night is a kind of a deal we do, and I'll share that with you a little bit later, where we just kind of talk through the week a little bit, and it helps us really get connected on what we need to do. But trade off roles from time to time, you know. Don't be of the mindset of, girl, I work, you know. I mean, you gotta. Girls like, you know, I work too, you know. Talk it out. Work it out. And last is just grace. Grace, grace, and more grace. We need that. Y'all have expectations? I do too. Do many of yours go unmet? Probably so. Mine do too. But I'm hoping you see in some of this, though, we've got some options. We can assume the best. We may need to change our expectations. We got to communicate them. We got to get them out in the open. And if you feel like a disconnect from your spouse, this is my little kind of cheat code with Jenny that I'll say to her. I'll say, hey, can I tell you the story in my head right now? Can I tell you the story that's in my head right now? And as I'm telling you this, I know it's not true, but you just need to know there's a story that's going on in my head right now. And I want to just tell you what it is. I feel like you don't care right now. I feel like I'm on the back burner right now. You see how much vulnerability is required for that conversation? That's a lot. But I would rather put it out there and for us to talk about it and come up with a solution than to keep it in and let the enemy build resentment over time. So we're going to take a first break. But as we do, can we do this real quick? I would love for you, just for 3 minutes, just to put your arm around your spouse. Y'all cuddle up, get next to each other, okay? This is, okay, it's all cool. I want you to answer these 2 questions real quick, okay? Here's question number 1. What is one expectation that is being met in your marriage right now that you want to celebrate? What is one expectation, even though it may not be perfectly met, but what is one expectation that you look at your marriage and you go, we're not 100 on that, we're not batting 1,000, but we're doing pretty good with that, and I want to celebrate that with you. Could you do that? And if you have time, you can answer the second one. This one will take a little bit more courage. Hey, is there an area where you would like to see us grow? Just one thing, okay? Y'all talk about that. We'll give you a couple minutes, and then we'll go to a break, okay? You know, there was some research that was done just a few years ago where they interviewed World War II vets. So they took these vets in, they asked them a series of questions. And they asked these World War II vets this question. One of the questions they asked was, do you feel closer to the people you serve with or to your spouse? And a large percentage of these vets reported, I actually feel much closer to the people I serve with than I do my own spouse. Why is that? The reason is because it's what we're about to talk about. When you go through conflict together, when you go through a battle together, when you're in the bunker and you look at each other and you know, hey, this is it. We all we got. And we're going to lock arms and we're going to see ourselves through to the other side of this. Conflict begins to bring you together with that type of attitude. And I say this all the time in my office. I'll say conflict is the price you pay for intimacy. want you to think about that. Conflict is the price you pay for intimacy. Now, I understand in this room, I am probably talking to what we like to call some conflict avoidant people. How many of you just like to keep peace? It's okay. Show your hands. It's a safe spot, right? Yeah, that was me too. For the first year of counseling, I was a horrible counselor. You know why? Because I wanted everybody to leave my office feeling good about themselves. And I always wanted to send them out on a cloud. I didn't want to address really some core issues of what was going on. If you're going to be a counselor, you got to learn how to do that, right? I was conflict avoidant. And so I learned that anybody can actually learn how to embrace conflict. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight in this next session. We're going to talk about how do we do that well, okay? So healthy couples have conflict, true or false? Yeah. Healthiness in your relationship is not defined by how much conflict you have. Healthiness in your relationship is defined by how much conflict can we work through. And you've got a lot of conflict around you every day. It makes it possible to work through a lot of things and build your connection deeper and deeper and deeper. Avoiding conflict leads to bitterness and resentment. We kind of talked about that a while ago. You ever notice that? You just don't talk about it. Maybe if I just kind of stuff it down. Maybe if I let the moment pass. Maybe if I go and pout for 20 minutes and then come back out. Maybe somehow in the universe, my spouse will pick up on all of that stuff and they'll just know and it'll be corrected, and yet it doesn't work that way, does it? You know that roughly 25% of your conversations in marriage, 25%, are either around conflict or problem-solving things. Is that not wild? 1 out of every 4 things we talk about is typically related to conflict or some problem that we need to solve. And so, again, I just say that to encourage you that you're going to have ample amount of time every day in your marriage to work through some conflict. Can I make you a promise real quick? I think I'm batting 1,000 with this promise. If you're the exception here, just raise your hand, but I don't think there will be. There has never been a morning that your spouse has woken up and hoped that they hurt you that day in some way. There's never been a morning your spouse has woken up and says, boy, I hope I disappoint him. I hope I let him down. It's actually one of your spouse's greatest fears, is to disappoint you and to let you down. And yet when we face conflict, there are so many different ways that we can kind of come around it, or we avoid it, or we pull back, or we're scared that, hey, if I say what I need to say or say what I want to say, maybe it's just going to make everything so much worse. So I'll just keep quiet, right? But conflict is a part of marriage. And I want to give you just this simple analogy that I use a lot. And I call this the 2 yards of marriage, okay? So see this pretty picture right up here? See the fence line that goes down it? This is what I say to couples all the time. When you got married, what you chose to do was move your backyards right next door to each other. And there is a fence that goes down both of your yards. It's actually the mystery of Scripture, because God says in Genesis, he says, listen, the 2 shall become what? 1. And yet you're still 2 separate people. How does that work? Well, what I want you to see with this analogy is this, is when you got married, you moved your backyard next to your spouse's. And can I just tell you something? You brought some weeds with you. And guess what? Your spouse brought some weeds with them too. And what I find in marriage, like we talked about a while ago, is that marriage will reveal your weeds quicker than anything. Here are 2 dangers I see with couples sometimes. They will either try to jump over the fence of their spouse's yard, try to fix it. We'll focus on it. You got a lot of weeds over here. What are you going to do about that? Right? Or we'll pull back from their fence altogether out of intimidation or just not knowing what to do. And what I want to encourage you tonight is just simply this. I want you to commit to your spouse that you're going to own your side of the yard. All the weeds are in my yard. The ones I know about, the ones I don't know about. I want to own my side of the yard. I think the next thing is you need to learn how do you support your spouse with all they have going on in their yard. We've already told you, we've given you the freedom here. You don't have to fix it. You can't fix it. You can stay on your side of the fence. But there's something really cool that happens when you walk up to that fence and you look over into their yard and you say, hey, I love you, and I love who you are. How can I support you? How can I be kind to you? How can I serve you today? It's a different deal, right? But these are kind of the 2 yards of marriage. And what I find is that these weeds begin to create all this conflict in our marriage. And I want to show you a cycle that I find I get into. I would be willing to bet my 25 cents that you get into as well. And it's this thing we call the drama triangle. This is when you should cue like some dramatic music. The drama triangle, okay? Now, the drama triangle is kind of unique in that it's like the Bermuda Triangle. If you ever fly into it, you're going to have a hard time getting out of it, all right? Check this out. Do you notice the top left corner up here? What does that say? Yeah, typically someone in the relationship will play one of these roles as what I call a starting gate position, okay? So imagine something tense happens in your marriage, and you're feeling the tension, right? You're going to be tempted to jump in one of these 3 places if you're not careful. So men, this is just a general rule, we love the rescue role. We love to put the Superman cape on and come save the day. And does it work well? No. And sometimes if we're not careful, we can see our spouse as the victim. Well, they're helpless there. They're hopeless. They need me. They need me to come show them what to do. They obviously can't figure it out. Let me come in and see if I can rescue that. Can I tell you that rescuers and victims love to find each other in life, and it's a match made in hell. Can I say that? And here's why. Because at some point, the rescuer gets so burnt out on trying to help this poor spouse who looks like a victim, and like they're not listening to me, they're not doing what I'm asking them to do or telling them what to do, and the spouse is getting mad. It's like, you can't tell me what to do. I got to figure this out myself, and it's just tension. And then look, what's the top right one say? Persecutor. So at some point, one of them gets so frustrated, they move to the persecutor role. Now, when I say persecutor, what do you think about? What image comes to mind? Now, persecutor, someone who's talking down to you. I'm thinking about somebody with their finger in your face, and they're letting you just have it right now, right? And what I find in marriage, what I've seen in my own marriage, I can go to all 3 of these in a matter of 30 seconds with my spouse, trying to do the right thing, and then I end up, guess where, as a victim at the end of it. Does this make sense at all? These are just 3 unhealthy roles that we can jump in and play really quickly. And I would ask you just for a minute to consider your own marriage. Which role do you find, and you don't have to answer, just to yourself, which role do you find that you gravitate towards the most? And then my second question to you is this. Which role do you see that your spouse gravitates towards the most? Because I'm about to show you what I believe in Christ allows us the freedom to step away from this triangle and to do conflict and to do marriage differently, okay? But you need to first understand, what role am I playing here, okay? Let's look at the healthier roles real quick. So this next slide is very colorful. But if you notice, we've still got rescuer, persecutor, and victim. But now what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to help change these roles to be more healthier and more productive. What does the rescuer have to learn how to do? Notice it goes straight down. They need to learn how to be a coach. What's the difference between a coach and a rescuer? Guys, have you ever seen a football coach going out on the field and playing the game for his players? No, he does not do that. What is he doing? He's trying to empower. He's trying to help. He's trying to support. That's what he's trying to do. And that's what a rescuer's got to learn how to do. They've got to stop trying to solve the issue and start listening more and trying to be supportive more in that role. That's what rescuers have to do. Learn to be a coach. What about the persecutor? Are you and your wife always going to agree? Thank you. You will not.
You will not agree on a lot of things. But just like we said a while ago, if you make agreement the goal and you elevate agreement above the relationship, you will be a persecutor. You will talk down to them until they see it your way, or they just give in and say, whatever, just go buy the boat, right? Persecutors have to learn how to be a challenger. What does that mean? Challengers, they have to be assertive. They have to say, hey, I see things differently than you do, but I'm not going to make my opinion the thing that wins out here. I just want to share my opinion with you. This right here, I think, if I can just add this, I think this is where our world is stuck right now. Because if you don't believe the way I do, think the way I do, see things the way I do, I will cancel you and I will cut you out. And I think we are missing it in some ways. I think we have to learn how to listen to each other. And when we don't make agreement the goal, it can change things because you and your spouse are not going to always see things eye to eye. What do victims have to do? Victim is somebody who feels hopeless. They feel like, I just can't change anything. My spouse just doesn't seem to see it my way. I feel hopeless here. I'm just stuck. Well, notice the next thing is to learn how to be a creator like your creator. And to say, God, help me see what is one thing right now I can do about my situation that would bring honor to you and honor to my marriage right now. And this really helps people who feel stuck in a particular conflict to go, I'm not stuck here. I can actually, with God's help, identify some new things that I can begin to do for myself. Does that make sense? Okay. Can I just I know this is a lot to kind of process, but I wanted to share this with you because this is where I see so many people get stuck in these vicious cycles. The next time, it will probably happen before 5 p.m. tomorrow. The next time you feel tension in your marriage, I want you to ask yourself first, what role am I tempted to play right now? Rescuer, victim, or persecutor? And then I want you to say, God, will you help me to play either the coach, the challenger, or the creator, and to be kind and be gracious with my spouse? This will help free up a lot. I want to talk about embracing conflict, and then I'm going to give you a meeting, and we're going to wrap up. How about that? Embracing conflict. I tell people in my office all the time, listen, you can't fight a battle you cannot name. With your spouse, sometimes it's important just to sit down and name the battle. What's our battle right now? We're not connected in our finances. We're not connected spiritually right now. It's okay. Don't be intimidated by it. But just name the battle. Own your side of the yard and stop blame shifting. Ooh, this is hard. Because if I'm honest with you, when I'm listening to my spouse, when there's conflict, I'm usually thinking about all the things that I know I've been trying to do, and I see all the things that she's not doing, and which one's easier to focus on? Her stuff, right? And I will blame shift over to her. But it changes things when you look at each other and go, hey, we're not going to do that. Why don't we just own our sides of the yard here? Can we do that? This is a big one if you're a note taker. When it comes to talking with your spouse, let your goal be this. Listen to understand. Do not listen to fix, defend, or agree. Listen to understand. Not to agree, not to fix, and not to defend yourself. When you make understanding the goal, I'm telling you, it creates so many open avenues for connection. By the way, this works for your kiddos too. Trying to listen to understand them. Own your role as coach, challenger, or creator. And I would encourage you to meet at the fence often, just to encourage each other and problem solve and pray with each other. How many of you have a regular routine where you kind of come together 3 or 4 times a week and just connect? Just talk, hang out. Yeah. I would encourage you, find a spot in your home that's your spot, that's not your bed. And here's why. If your spouse is like my spouse, as soon as we get in the bed and my girl gets horizontal, she's out in like 2 minutes flat. Okay? And I'm like, we're right in the middle of talking, and okay. So you need to find a place in your home that's your spot. So our spot is right in front of our bed. We have 2 chairs, and they swivel. Cool little swivel chairs. We'll sit in those chairs. We'll swivel towards each other, look at each other. Here's the thing. Put your phones down at night. Put your phones down and get away from social media. It's one of the things, too, that's beginning to really invade marriages. Do you know on average about 6 hours a day are spent on a phone? Do you know how many times your finger swipes per day on average? Over 2,000. Yeah. Research is saying we're actually becoming desensitized to fun in our world. Why is that? Because we're so used to a screen being in front of us so much. Our brains are having to produce serotonin and dopamine at a level that God never created your brain to do that. And so now when you have a seriously fun, cool moment in life that you want to share with each other, that moment by comparison just feels like this. And over here, serotonin's pumping like crazy in your brain from screens. Put your phones down. Connect with each other. Find your spot, okay? And this is what I was going to encourage you guys with is a particular meeting that Jenny and I have been doing now for about 15 years. And this meeting was birthed out of just honestly, just a painful season we had to. It was back after our adoption process, and counselors were like, hey, you really could use some of this. So this is what we do. We have a spot. We meet there every Sunday night at 8:30. I just told you it's our bedroom. And then what we do is we come prepared for that meeting. This is very simple, okay? But this is how we resolve anything that's unresolved from the week that we just got out of. Ours is Sunday night. Yours can be whatever night works for you guys, okay? Jenny brings a piece of paper, and I bring a piece of paper. She doesn't see mine before the meeting, and I don't see hers before the meeting. What's on the paper? 2 things. On the left side of the paper, if you want to write this down, things we want to celebrate. Things we want to celebrate from this week. Okay? So this is on the left side of the piece of paper. And on the right side of the piece of paper, an area we need to grow. You're just going to write down, here's an area we need to grow. This is where we have some conflict. But I want to bring something that I can celebrate, and I want to bring something that I can grow in. You guys tracking with me so far? Okay, watch this. Why do you bring something to celebrate? The great theologian Mary Poppins said, a spoonful of sugar can make some medicine go down. Jenny and I show up. We usually open our meeting with just a quick prayer. God, will you help us? Give us wisdom. Help us to be open, just like Bryant prayed. Help us to hear our part. What's our side of the yard here that we need to own? We bring our favorite snacks to this meeting. Our favorite right now is popcorn. When it comes out of the microwave, barely open it, shove a bag of M&Ms in it, close it, melts in there, pour it in a bowl. It's money. I'm telling you. Bring it. So we make this fun. The phones are up. The TV's off. We tell our kids what we're doing. We want our kids to understand that conflict is normal, and mom and dad have a plan on what we do to deal with it. So we come sit down in front of our bed. We say a quick prayer. I let Jenny go first. She usually says, you got to bring 1 to 1, okay? Just 1 to 1. One thing to celebrate, one thing you want to grow in, okay? And she'll start out by saying, hey, this week, I want to celebrate something on Tuesday night that happened. And she shares it with me. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And she goes, and this is the thing that I want to bring this week that I've been struggling with a bit, and I want to just bring it up with you, okay? And it doesn't have to be a super heavy thing. It can be something really light sometimes. Watch this. If you're taking notes, whatever's on that right side of the piece of paper, whatever you write down as an area you need to grow, you have to first pray this prayer before you sit down with your spouse. God, show me my part in this. Show me my side of the yard with this issue I just wrote down that I'm going to bring before my spouse. So can you imagine the scene when we sit down and we have that delicious popcorn, and she says, this is what I want to celebrate. And hey, this week, this is where I got hurt this week, and I want to share it with you. Or just something I want to grow in. And as I'm sharing this with you, Lee, I want you to know, hey, God has shown me I have a part to play in this. Now, can you imagine if your spouse said those words to you? Are you going to be defensive, or are you going to be like, hey, just talk to me. What is it? You're not going to be defensive because she's already owned it. She has a part in what she's bringing, right? And then I share my list with her. One thing to celebrate, One thing I want to grow in. What if you have 3 things you want to grow in? Pick one. Don't overwhelm your spouse and bring it. Okay? You guys tracking? So you have your spot. You have your list. You take turns sharing your list back and forth. Now, this is where it gets hard. Your spouse presented something that they want to grow in, and you're presenting something that you want to grow in. You have a choice now. Which one are we going to focus on this week? Hang on, wait a minute. Are you saying mine may not get picked this week? Yes. We have learned that if we try to take on too much at one time, we get so overwhelmed by it, and there's no progress, and we get discouraged in it. But what we have learned too is if we just pick one of them and share that one thing, we said, that's the thing we're going to work on this week. We do not get up out of those swivels until both of us have said one thing we're going to do to try to work on that. And I don't tell her what she needs to do. If she didn't tell me, I just say, hey, Jenny, this is what I think I'm going to try this week to work on that. We call this the weekly meeting. It's pretty simple, right? And I've included that on your handout right there. I didn't give you all the details on the handout, but just draw you 2 columns, thing I want to celebrate, something I want to grow in. And can I ask you this? Don't come empty-handed. Don't come to your spouse that week or that time of that meeting and go, hey, I'm good. I think I'm good, girl. You just robbed yourself of an opportunity to work through something. Bring something. Every time. I don't care how big or small it is. Don't bring your mama to the first one. I need you to deal with your mama. No, don't bring King Kong to the first one. Bring something that's manageable, though, okay? Some examples of some of ours recently. Can I just be real as we close? Some examples of some of mine recently have been things like, I need to work on my tone with my children. And I'm finding that I need to work on maybe exercise or eating healthier. For her and I, it could be something like, hey, I felt very dismissed this week a couple times, and yet I know I've had a busy week and I probably was needy some this week, right? These are some things we talk about, but we celebrate. And then you can close it by praying with each other, and then all you have to do now is get up from that meeting and go do your week, and you both commit to what you said you're going to do. And this is about progress. This is not about perfection. And I just want to challenge you as we close today, whether it's unmet expectations that we talked about in the first workshop, or if it's unresolved conflict, the enemy would love to use those things to destroy you. He would love to convince you that the greatest problem in your marriage is sitting beside you, and it is not. The problem is deep inside of us. And God, with his grace and his love, is allowing those things to come out of you frequently. Why? Because he loves you. He wants you to have freedom. And he wants you and your spouse to live a life of connectedness with him.